My name is Marcus Harlow. I worked 22 years with the U.S. National Park Service, Northern District, Alaska Sector, assigned to the Chugach Backcountry Patrol, stationed just outside Seward, where the air thins with pine and the silence is deep enough to choke you. In the summers, I lived alone in a ranger cabin positioned a few clicks west of Blackstone Glacier. Not many folks knew about the place. It was meant to be quiet, remote, disconnected, just the way the agency liked it. Most of my work was simple: track animal migration, report fire hazards, mark avalanche paths, redirect lost hikers back toward the lodge. Every once in a while, someone would go missing. Tourist, hunter, someone overconfident with a map and an attitude. We were told to file and forget. Nature was a cruel teacher, they'd say, but that year, something changed. Something came down from the high glacier line, and it didn't behave like anything I'd ever tracked. This isn't a story about superstition. It's not folklore. I'm not here to share ghost stories or myths about the Alaskan wild. I'm giving you facts, cold, hard facts, because I need someone to hear them before they disappear again. This started on July 14th, 2012. I remember the day because it was hotter than usual, that sticky kind of heat that made the trees feel like they were leaning in too close. The air smelled like rust, wet iron, clinging to the underbrush. Around 0930 hours, I received a patch-through on a secure ranger band, one I hadn't heard in nearly 6 years. It wasn't local. The voice identified itself with federal clearance. No name, just a flat instruction. Vacate the lower trail system immediately. Do not initiate contact. Echo team en route. Maintain cabin perimeter. Lock down. Now most people hear Echo Team and shrug. But anyone who's been around long enough knows. That's SEAL talk. Tier 1 tasking. Off-book. Deep black clearance. No standard patrol would bring in Echo, and especially not in my forest. I pressed the line, asked for clarification. Is this related to missing persons reports last quarter? Illegal border crossings? The voice cut me off. Not relevant. This is Operation Gray Echo. Stay offline. We're not coming to save you. We're cleaning up a mess. Then, silence. I didn't hear another word. Not from them. Not from anyone. But about an hour later, I felt them. The chopper came in low. No lights, no transponder, just a ghost hum over the valley, blades muffled like they were flying through cotton. 6 men rappelled down from the tree canopy, moving fast and tight, black gear, facial camo, no insignia. I only saw their eyes, cold, mechanical, not the kind of men who were trained to ask questions. Just execute. They didn't knock on the cabin. They didn't speak. One of them, taller than the rest, stopped in the clearing and stared up at me through the window. He didn't wave. He didn't blink. Just stared, like he was memorizing my face. And then they moved into the woods, swallowed whole by the tree line. Now I know these woods. I've hiked every cut trail and carved path from Point Agnes to the foot of Blackstone Ridge. But these men didn't use trails. They moved through brush like it didn't exist. Straight lines, no sound, like predators. I waited. That first night was quiet. Eerily quiet. No birds, no wind, even the insects stopped their racket. You ever hear a whole forest go still at once? It's not peace, it's warning. By day 3, I knew something was wrong. No contact, no retrieval, just radio static. Then, at dawn on the 4th day, something came back. At first, I thought it was a bear, something dragging through the gravel and brush, low and desperate. But then I saw the boots. Standard issue navy, coated in blood. One of the seals, alone, stumbled through the clearing, fell face first into the mud, and didn't move. I rushed out, Checked for a pulse. He was alive. Barely. Body torn open in places, his neck and arm sliced like he'd run through barbed wire. His helmet was gone. No rifle. No communications. Just him. And his eyes. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking past me, at something behind me that wasn't there. Like he couldn't trust the world around him anymore. I dragged him inside, bolted the cabin, took 3 tourniquets to stop the bleeding, gave him morphine from the field kit. He didn't say a word until the sun dropped behind the ridgeline. And then, as the forest dipped into darkness, he whispered, "We weren't killed by men." That was it. No name, no explanation, just that. The way he said it, it wasn't fear, it was acceptance. Like he'd already seen the end and just needed to make sure someone else knew it was coming. 12 hours later, another chopper came in, different type. No seals, no insignia, just 2 men in gray suits and flat expressions. They took him. No names, no orders, no explanations. One of them handed me a sealed envelope. Inside, a form letter. Threats of imprisonment. Immediate reassignment. National security concerns. All standard hush orders. But there was something else. Taped to the inside of the envelope was a strip of torn fabric. Camouflage. With a name stitched in blood, Mendez. I checked the SEAL roster later. There was no Mendez listed. Not then. Not ever. Which means either the SEAL who crawled back wasn't supposed to exist, or he wasn't the one who crawled back. Here's the part no one asks. Why send Tier 1 assets into uninhabited Alaskan wilderness? Why jam satellites and wipe GPS signatures if it's just a surveillance op? Why pull out so fast? No sweep, no cleanup, unless they weren't there for who was in the forest. They were there for what? And they didn't win. I stayed up for nights after that. Rifle by the door, lights never off. Because out here, things don't stay buried. The woods remember. The cold keeps secrets. But not forever. And now, neither will I. Because I've seen the reports. I've seen the satellite stills. They match the shape. The same one drawn in cave systems all over Alaska and Canada. Elongated limbs. Bipedal but wrong in the gait. No mouth until it opens too wide. Predator. Mimic. Whatever name you want to give it, it's not from here. That's what they couldn't admit. Project Widowmaker wasn't a containment op. It was a cover-up. They lost something out there. And now it's moving. One SEAL made it out. Or something wearing his face did. And it's still walking. Still waiting. I'm Marcus Harlow. I wasn't supposed to talk, but MindFuel gave me a way to make this stick. If you're watching this, don't just scroll past. Subscribe. Come back. There's more. Much more. This wasn't an isolated incident. And the next chapter? It doesn't happen in the woods. It happens underground. The file listed them as a reconnaissance squad with top-tier clearance, something similar to SEAL Team 6, but without the press, without the awards. These men didn't exist on any official roster. They called them Gray Echo. 6 men, airlifted into a sector that had been redlined on every public map since the 80s. Their target was a patch of land located roughly 37 miles east of Denali. Nothing but frozen rock, collapsed tree lines, and hundreds of square miles of undisturbed glacier. There was no station there, no base, no cabins, no trails, but someone, or something, had been transmitting. A burst pattern signal, encrypted, repeating. Same 6 numbers, same interval, no known source. Military intelligence picked it up twice during satellite repositioning drills, only on polar orbits. No civilian satellites had it. No ham operator ever logged it. Whatever was broadcasting from that zone, it didn't want to be heard. But once you tuned in, you couldn't tune out. The official order was phrased like a textbook black op. Investigate and disable unknown transmission origin. Site, hollow teeth, priority, code black. That's what got my attention. Hollow teeth. I'd heard that name before. Back when I was a rookie ranger stationed out near Talkeetna, there was a retired tracker, Yupik man named Elijah Kunik. Lived off-grid in a broken-down Airstream trailer deep in the foothills. Only came into town twice a year for salt and diesel. We had a drink once. He told me stories, warnings really. He said, "There's a place out, past the bones of the ice, where the mountain is hollow, not with cave, with mouths, teeth, too many." I thought he was talking about karst ridges or glacier fractures. I laughed, but he didn't. He just looked past me and said, "Those who hear the echo don't come back with the same face." Back then I chalked it up to old myths. Alaskan folklore is full of them. Wendigo, kushtaka, things that live in fog and trick the ears. But standing in that ranger cabin, holding the envelope marked Gray Echo, and seeing the words hollow teeth fru, typed in all caps, it wasn't folklore anymore. That drop zone was cursed. Locals had avoided it for decades. Indigenous maps marked it only with bones, old symbols scratched into rock by generations who knew better than to trespass. That whole sector was marked unstable terrain, which was government speak for don't go unless you're willing to not come back. But the SEALs went anyway. They touched down at 0400, zero comms, low visibility insertion. The mission briefing claimed satellite coverage would be unreliable due to solar flare interference. But I've spoken to satellite techs. That kind of interference is rare. Timed interference? Nearly impossible. They didn't lose satellite because of the sun. They lost it because something blocked it. Within minutes of drop, helmet cams started glitching. Thermal reads shifted erratically. Movement markers flagged heat signatures that vanished mid-frame. One operator tagged a visual that looked like a man, only to have the image fragment into static. Then return, same shape, facing a different direction. These men were trained to clear hostage zones, breach deep water rigs, neutralize hostiles in caves, and kill houses across 4 continents. But they weren't trained for this. One of the SEALs, call sign Redback, reported hearing low-frequency murmurs coming from under the ice. Described it as not mechanical, not human, like something ancient humming a dead song. Another, call sign Roach, logged a direct statement over comms before it went dark. He said, "There's no structure here, but something's living under the ice. Copy? Something's waiting, watching." That was the last confirmed audio transmission from any of them. The next 48 hours are blank in the file, just timestamps. Then a final entry. 1 line. 1 returned, unknown condition, requesting containment. No name, no medevac report, no coordinates, just that. 1 returned, not 6, not 5, 1. And even that might have been generous. You see, the man they brought back wasn't listed on the official deployment team. His DNA didn't match the profile from his dog tags. His fingerprints came back as inconclusive. The only match they got was partial, linked to a man declared KIA in Afghanistan 7 years prior. So either the records were wrong, or that thing wearing his uniform wasn't him at all. And here's what kept me up since. According to their mission map, the Hollow Teeth was an abandoned zone. No trails, no signal, no life. But when the thermal cams flickered on for half a second before dying, they showed movement. Too much of it. Whole heat signatures rising from beneath the ice. Not one, dozens, maybe more. And the worst part? They were shaped like us. Only taller, only wrong. And they were moving upward. Day 1, 1930 hours. The sun never really sets out there. Not in July. just dips beneath the glacier rim, casting everything in a dull twilight that never ends. No shadows, no true darkness. But that kind of light, it plays tricks, makes movement hard to detect, makes stillness even harder. The squad set up perimeter just outside the transmission source, a clearing no more than 40 meters wide, surrounded by bent trees and ice-slick boulders. According to the mission record, it looked like there had once been an encampment there. Flattened snow, charred metal debris, no electronics, no tents, no bodies, just bone fragments. Long bones, fused at the joints, stripped, blackened, split straight down the center like they'd been emptied. Even the medtech couldn't explain it. The logs referred to it as a scorched zone. Whatever happened there didn't happen recently, but it hadn't happened long ago either. That night, they rigged tripwires, standard fiber optic tension triggers, no alarms, just motion pings on the HUD, placed every 10 meters across the north and east ridges. First tripwire snapped at 0117 hours. Squad response time, 17 seconds. Team lead. Spectre and Roach moved to intercept. No movement, no heat signature, no impact trails. The snow wasn't even disturbed. That's impossible. Wires don't snap themselves, especially not carbon-braided tension wire designed for jungle insurgents. Second wire broke at 0139, then another, then two more. By 200, the entire perimeter was down. But they still saw nothing. No one was running. Nothing was hiding. They weren't being hunted. They were being watched. Helmet cam footage, redacted, but fragments remained, showed sudden bursts of static. Every few minutes, the video would freeze on a still frame that didn't match the previous motion. Something standing at the edge of the tree line. Tall, narrow, frozen. Then gone. Spectre's voice cracked over audio. They're watching us. Standing still. No heat signature. Let that sink in. No heat signature. And yet, they were visible. At least in still frames. Only ever caught when nothing else was moving. Like they only existed between moments. Infrared scanned again. Nothing. But the men could feel them. Like a weight in the gut. That buried instinct, older than training, telling them to leave. But they stayed. Because that was the job. And the next morning, that's when they found the symbol. Carved into a glacial shelf 20 meters outside camp. 7 concentric rings spiraling inward. Every ring embedded with vertebrae. Human vertebrae. Frozen in place, like they'd grown from the ice itself. Redback knelt to inspect the center. It wasn't hollow. It wasn't rock. It was a socket, a fresh one, dripping, as if something had just pulled itself out of it. That was the first time the command team considered aborting the mission. But it was already too late, because from that moment on, the air shifted, compass needles drifted by 10 degrees, clocks lost time, and most telling of all, Spectre's body cam started catching frames that weren't his, views from inside the trees, angles he never stood in, looking toward him, as if the camera had split, as if someone or something was looking back through it. The mission journal noted erratic squad behavior starting at 0600, loss of appetite, paranoia, 3 men reporting identical dreams, snow breathing around us like lungs and eyes beneath it, open, then gone. This wasn't sleep deprivation. These men were chemically stabilized. They'd survived war zones. But something about the stillness was breaking them, and they weren't even aware of how deeply it had already started to reach inside them. By the end of day 1, 2 members reported hearing names whispered through comms. Names that weren't part of the team. One whispered name repeated 3 times. Mendez, Mendez, Mendez. But there was no Mendez on this team. Not anymore. Because as far as command knew, Mendez died in the desert. 7 years earlier. Yet his name was still being spoken, out loud, by something just out of sight, and that night, they'd see it for the first time. Not clearly, not yet, but enough. Enough to understand that this mission wasn't a blackout op. It was a one-way ticket, and no matter how far they thought they'd come, something had already been waiting, long before the boots hit the snow. It had listened, it had learned, and now it had faces. Narrator, quiet, urgent, close. If this is your first time hearing this, don't think for a second this is where it ends. This was just the first night. Subscribe to MindFuel right now, because what happens on day 2? It doesn't stay in the trees. It gets closer, much closer. And the next chapter proves they never had a chance. Day 2. 800 hours. Temperature, minus 14 degrees Celsius. Visibility, clear. The transmissions had stopped. No signal, no pings, no electrical signatures. The forest had gone quiet again. That unnatural kind of quiet that doesn't belong in the wild. No crows, no wind, just that steady, deep silence that presses into the ears and feels like pressure, like something's pushing back. Redback was first to spot it. Near the southern edge of the clearing, beneath a half-buried rock shelf, the snow dipped inward, sharply, too clean to be natural. They brushed away the crusted ice and found the opening. A shaft, roughly 3 feet wide, circular, perfectly symmetrical. It dropped straight down into the frozen ground, 40 feet deep by their estimate. No signs of erosion, no fracturing around the edge. Just a clean, smooth column carved through solid ice. But here's the thing. There are no natural sinkholes in that region. No geothermal activity, no boreholes. Nothing explains why that shaft was there, or how it was made. The men stood around it, silent. Then Spectre took a knee at the edge, shined his tack light down the center. That's when they saw them. Marks, dozens of them, deep gashes along the walls. Not from ice picks or climbing gear, these were curved, jagged, and inconsistent, like claws. 4 digits, running upward, not down, from the bottom, up. Scrapes that gouged through 6 inches of compressed permafrost, some so deep they exposed old black soil beneath, meaning this shaft hadn't been dug, it had been escaped. They prepped rappelling gear. Command wanted eyes inside. Private Lugo volunteered. Helmet cam live. Comms linked. He clipped in, locked the belay, and dropped. 10 feet, 20, 30. He never reached the bottom. At 38 feet, Lugo screamed. A sharp, sudden shriek, not from pain but confusion. Like something had grabbed the line or the ground had shifted beneath him. The last thing they heard over comms was, "There's something moving." Snap, static, then nothing. The rope went slack. The team scrambled. Roach and Spectre tried reeling him up, but the harness was empty, still clipped, still intact. But Lugo was gone, just gone. No fall noise, no impact, no descent. 1 second he was there, and the next. The pit was silent again. And then, 30 seconds later, the scream came back. But it wasn't Lugo. It used his voice, sure, but something was off. The cadence, the tone, the scream held too long, too even, like it had been copied, stretched, and repeated through something that didn't know how to feel. Ah! Then it warped, dropped in pitch, echoed up the shaft, as if something else was screaming using his mouth. They pulled back, guns raised, formation tight, but nothing emerged. No body, no shadow, just that endless open shaft, glistening with frost, scratched from within. The men sealed the rope and marked the site, but no one volunteered to go down again. That night, the logs recorded strange activity in the gear. Battery drains, optics misaligned, 3 men reported feeling like they'd been touched in their sleep, not watched. Touched. Spectre described it best. It's like the cold grew fingers. They moved camp 100 meters northeast, started new perimeter drills. But it didn't matter. Whatever had come out of that shaft, it wasn't waiting down there anymore. It was walking. And every time one of them looked away from the tree line, something moved, just slow enough not to be seen, but fast enough to be closer the next time you blinked. This wasn't just a mission anymore. This was containment, but not of a threat. Of knowledge that they'd seen the impossible, heard a scream that didn't belong to a man anymore. And deep down, every single one of them knew Lugo didn't fall. He was taken. And whatever took him was learning. It had a voice now, and soon it would have more. If you're still watching this, if you made it this far, then you already know this is no ordinary story. This isn't a tale of survival. It's a record of what was buried and what got out. Subscribe to MindFuel right now. Because what happened next doesn't just change the mission. It changes who came back. And in Chapter 4, you'll understand why they started turning on each other and why the face in the firelight wasn't always the one they deployed with. Day 3, 4,418 hours. It was just before full daylight, though the sun never truly rose in that part of the world, just smeared the horizon with a cold copper light. The men were gathered around the second fire. No one had slept. Not really. Then, through the mist, movement. A shape walking upright, limping, swaying. Spectre raised his rifle first, Redback followed. Thermals were scrambled again, same interference as the day before. But the shape didn't run. It didn't hide. It walked directly toward camp. It was Lugo. Same uniform, same gear, no weapon, bare hands. His face was pale, his lips cracked and blistered like he'd been caught in exposure for hours, maybe days. But his body showed no frostbite, no bruising, not even the cuts he had when he went down that shaft. He stopped 10 feet from the fire, didn't speak, didn't blink, just stood there. Then he smiled, too wide. Wider than his face should have allowed. The kind of smile that doesn't connect to anything warm, just skin peeled back over something pretending to feel. And then he said it, softly at first, monotone. "It's warm in here." They called his name. He didn't respond. He just kept saying it. "It's warm in here. It's warm in here. It's warm in here." Each repetition came faster, as if the words weren't being spoken by choice, but forced through muscle memory, like someone had memorized a recording of speech and was now playing it back on meat. Spectre approached, slowly. He gave one more command. "Lugo, if you can hear me, identify." That's when Lugo tilted his head. Not turned, tilted, like an animal trying to mimic curiosity. And then he lunged. No warning, no scream, no wind-up. He went straight for the throat, hands stretched, fingers bent at impossible angles. Roach fired first, then the others. 3 rounds, then 7. Lugo's body fell into the snow, twitching, blood steaming into the frozen earth. When they rolled him over, he was still smiling, even with half his jaw gone, still smiling. The team locked down, dug a makeshift perimeter and radioed in for emergency retrieval. The reply from High Command was short. "Secure the body. Do not burn. Await instructions." The word they used wasn't hostile. It was asset. They were told to bag him. But Redback refused, said he wanted answers first. So they cut him open. Field autopsy. No anesthesia. Just bone shears and grit. Inside Lugo's body, nothing was where it should have been. The organs were wrong. Heart on the right side. Lungs fused together. Liver bloated and black. His stomach full of teeth. Human teeth. dozens of them, some still with traces of root and gum, others chewed flat. No one could explain it. No one wanted to. But Spectre said something that didn't make it into the official logs. He looked at what was left of Lugo and whispered, "That thing was wearing him." And he meant it literally, like a skin suit, like a template, like it had studied Lugo, his voice, his habits, his movements, then put him on and walked him into camp like a bloody handshake. That night, 3 of the men started hearing their own names, whispered in the dark. Roach said he woke up to find muddy boot prints leading to his cot. Spectre stopped eating, claimed his own reflection was smiling before he did, and Redback, toughest of the unit. He tried to radio base again, but when he keyed the mic, a voice came through before he spoke. His own voice, repeating one phrase over and over again. "It's warm in here. It's warm in here." They burned Lugo's body the next morning, against orders. Spectre said if Command had a problem, they could come out and dig up whatever was left. No one ever did. They moved camp again, 2 kilometers north, closer to the ridge. Didn't matter. By then, the damage was already done. Something had breached their circle. Something had a name now, had a voice, a face, a uniform, and it wasn't just watching anymore. It was rehearsing. And soon, it would be ready to replace them. If you think this is fiction, ask yourself this. Why did the last surviving member of Grey Echo try to burn off his own fingerprints before the debrief? Why was the full report sealed under 5 separate clearances and buried beneath satellite data files? Why is every man who touched this mission either dead, missing, or locked in private institutions? You want the rest? Subscribe to MindFuel now, because the next chapter doesn't take place in the snow. It happens in the barracks, where something walked him and saw. Day 4, 2,026 hours. It came without a sound, no wind, no footfalls, no crunch of snow, only breath. Not their own, something else's. It started as a shimmer at the tree line, like heat waves in the dark, distorting the edges of the trees. Redback was on watch. He scanned right. Nothing. Scanned left. Then it stepped out. Tall, at least 8 feet. Too thin, pale skin that didn't reflect the light, just absorbed it. No mouth, no nose, just 2 recessed sockets, glowing faintly like something burned behind the bone. He didn't wait. He fired. 308 round to the chest, direct hit. It didn't fall. The thing twisted. Not dodged, twisted. Spine bending too far, head tilting backwards, like it was made of fabric, not bone. Then it ran, back into the tree line. No sound, no blood. That was the first one. Then there were more. From the north, the east, from below, figures emerging from the snow itself, rising like smoke from buried vents. No warning, no pattern, just sudden presence. The men scrambled to form a perimeter, classic L-shaped retreat formation, guns up, but it didn't help. They weren't being attacked. They were being moved, pushed, herded. Spectre's log recorded the next 8 minutes in full detail. Minute 1, they held formation. 1 down, Gomez, gone between blinks. One moment he was covering the rear, the next his rifle dropped into the snow, still warm. Minute 3, Michaels reported motion on thermal. Shapes circling just outside range, hovering, not advancing, just waiting. Minute 5, Roach fired 3 rounds, hit nothing. Claimed he saw his own face reflected in one of the creature's sockets. Minute 7, Jin screamed, said something touched his thoughts, then shot himself in the foot, deliberate, to be left behind. Minute 8, Redback gone. No scream, no flash. Just vanished. 8 minutes, 3 men gone, and none of the creatures ever made contact, because that wasn't their intent. They didn't need to chase. They didn't need to strike. They just moved them, step by step, angle by angle, into a path. By the time the squad realized, They were boxed in, surrounded. The terrain to the west had changed, an incline where there had been flat land, a break in the trees where there should have been brush. The world had shifted under their feet. And that's when Spectre said it. Not over the radio, not in the log, in the helmet cam, quiet, final. They weren't hunting us. They were herding us to somewhere. It made sense. The way they never struck directly. The way they always left one man to see what happened to the others. The whispers, the mimicry, the hollowed ground, all of it, leading somewhere. Every maneuver was a funnel, every loss, a correction. And now the remaining squad, just 4 men, was exactly where the creatures wanted them, pinned against the rise, with one way left to go, north, toward the hollow teeth, not the edge of it, inside, because whatever waited there had learned to open the door. Narrator, calm intensity building. They didn't run that night. They followed, not because they were ordered, but because deep down, something in their minds told them they'd already crossed the point of no return, and somewhere beneath that ice, their names were already being spoken, because this wasn't random. It was patterned, and they weren't being studied. They were being replaced, one by one, body by body, face by face. The next chapter, they find the nest, and by then, it's already remembering how to walk like them. And worse, it's remembering how to think like them. Narrator, end beat. If you haven't subscribed to MindFuel yet, do it now. You need to hear the rest of this, because Chapter 6 doesn't take place above ground. It's beneath the hollow teeth. And what they find there? It was waiting long before we ever invented war, and it's still waiting now. They didn't choose to enter the cave. The terrain left them no other option. The trees behind them had closed, literally. Same path they'd come down just the day before was now jagged cliff face, lined with vertical fissures too narrow for a man to pass through. The creatures hadn't attacked again. They didn't need to. The land itself was doing the work now. The last 4 men of Grey Echo advanced along a narrow ice corridor, boot soles slipping on frosted shale. Visibility dropped to near zero. Then they saw it. An opening. Cracked rock face like a wound in the base of the ridge. Gaping inward, breathing cold. The edges of the stone weren't natural. They were scored, like something large had pushed through. They entered single file. No chatter, no lights beyond low red beam. 10 meters in, their comms flickered. Then, signal. Roach's HUD pinged. Bars, weak but real. An uplink. First signal in over 3 days. Spectre tried hailing base. This is Grey Echo. Code black. Team compromised. Request emergency extraction. Coordinates transmitting. There was static. Then a reply. Negative. That location does not exist. Spectre repeated the message. Same answer. Then the voice on the other end changed. Same cadence, same phrasing, but a different voice. That location does not exist. That location does not exist. Over and over, like a recording on a loop, with breath between the words. The signal cut again, and the silence returned. They went deeper. Narrower passage, then a drop. 12 feet. The walls slick with condensation. The deeper they went, the more wrong the environment became. Ice stopped behaving like ice. There were walls that bent light. There were places where you could see your own breath hanging still while the others kept moving. At 70 meters in, Redback spotted it. A half-buried panel. Military issue tech. Corroded beyond field age. They uncovered more. Wiring, a power unit, chunks of rusted plating with USAF stencils, even a tactical beacon crushed flat like someone had bitten into it. Spectre's cam caught one clear tag. Project Mantis, Site 09, 1973, the 70s. These weren't just lost supplies. This was from another team, another mission, one no one ever talked about. Except, here's the thing. No one on the squad had ever heard of Project Mantis, and none of that equipment matched modern build, because it wasn't meant to be found. At the 200-meter mark, the floor changed. No longer ice, not stone either, it pulsed. Soft beneath the boots, rhythmic, breathing. The temperature rose by 8 degrees. The air smelled like salt and copper, and under their feet, a deep, low vibration. Not seismic, not mechanical, organic. Something huge was beneath them, resting or listening. They placed a seismic mic against the wall. The feedback nearly ruptured the sensor, because what was under them wasn't just breathing, it was awake. Spectre made the call to pull back, but Roach refused. He said it didn't matter. The way out was gone. The land behind them wasn't the same anymore. Whatever was moving them, it was still guiding them forward. Then the lights flickered, and the walls began to hum. If you're still watching this, then you've seen the truth most people will never face. We didn't discover that cave. We weren't the first. And whatever's inside, it's been cataloging us for decades. This wasn't a mission. It was an offering. And in Chapter 7, we find the heart of it, and the part of the report that was never meant to be transcribed. Subscribe to MindFuel now, because next, they learn what it means when the cave starts speaking back. Deeper in the system, the walls stopped looking like ice. They breathed. The team didn't speak anymore, not because they didn't want to, but because the silence wasn't empty anymore. Every word they said came back to them from somewhere too close. Slightly delayed, slightly distorted, slightly wrong. They stopped trying to make sense of direction. The walls had begun looping. Cave structure was wrong, Escher-like turns that brought them back to the same junction from impossible angles. No landmarks, no shadows, only that low-frequency hum. Then they found it. Or maybe it found them. A chamber the size of a cathedral. The ice had melted into thick, translucent membranes, blue, veined, and wet. Lining the walls were hollows, pods, organic, slumped open at the top like ruptured cocoons, and inside them, people, still breathing, eyes wide, chests rising and falling in perfect sync, mouths open, but they didn't scream. Couldn't. Spectre knelt beside one pod, wiped frost off the membrane. Inside, a man wearing an old USAF flight suit. The patch, Site 09, 1974. His body was whole, but his skin, it looked stretched, like it had been grown to fit around him. His jaw twitched, eyes blinked, but there was no one home. Then the others saw it. More faces, men, women, some in modern gear, some in uniforms from decades ago, some still in civilian clothes, all alive, all silent. Every single one of them wore the same expression, mouth open, eyes wide, looking at something only they could see. Roach stepped back. He whispered, "They're not dead, they're dreaming." And that's when the wall moved. One of the empty pods shifted, rippling like muscle. A long, wet tear split down the center. And from inside, something crawled out. Not walked, crawled. Like it was remembering how. It had too many limbs, too smooth. No face, just wet bone and cartilage, clicking as it turned toward them. Then it spoke. Not in words, but in their voices. All of them. Mixed together, layered, every voice from the squad, living and dead, even Lugo, even Redback, all coming from one open cavity where a mouth should be. Spectre screamed. Roach dropped his rifle, pulled the thermite. "Light it now! Light it now!" The chamber burst in fire, white heat, flesh split open. And then, the scream. It didn't come from the creature. It came from every radio, from inside the pods, from the walls, from Spectre's communications. The scream was inside their heads, and it was human, but not one human. It was all of them, screaming together, an echo made of every voice they'd ever heard, somehow amplified, somehow alive and angry. The fire didn't kill it, but it bought seconds, and in those seconds, one of them ran. They say the human brain will protect itself from what it can't process. Maybe that's why no one remembers how the last man made it out. Maybe that's why his boots were melted, why the skin on his hands was stripped clean from the fingers down, why his dog tags were found 40 miles from any road. He showed up 3 days later, naked, bleeding, still whispering the words, "They weren't killing us. They were learning us." He never said what he saw after he ran. He never gave a full statement. He just sat in that padded room in Anchorage, head tilted toward the wall. And when the doctor leaned in to ask what he remembered, he smiled, too wide, and whispered, "It's warm in here." If you've made it this far, you already know. This wasn't just a mission. It wasn't just a cover-up. It was a pattern. And it's still happening. One survivor, no extraction, and a breach no one ever closed. Subscribe to MindFuel now, because what happens in Chapter 8? They declassify what was buried underneath Alaska in 1973 and explain why there were no footprints around the body when they found it, just a trail of smiles. The last man made it out alone. He didn't remember how he reached the tree line, didn't remember the freezing rain, didn't remember the 3 full days between the collapse of the hive and his appearance 26 miles west of base camp. All he remembered was waking up in a concrete room, warm light, sterile air, white ceiling. 2 men sat across from him, crisp uniforms, no name tags, rank insignia blurred. One bore a silver eagle, the other only a barcode patch. The survivor, call sign Spectre, blinked hard, lips cracked, voice hoarse. First thing he said, "What were they?" The officers didn't answer. The younger one opened a folder. Inside, blank pages, white sheets with nothing written but a small symbol print at the bottom corner. 7 rings, concentric, with a black line etched through the center. Spectre leaned forward. They weren't animals, they weren't insurgents, so what the hell were they? Still no answer. Instead, the officer reached beneath the table, placed a small device on the steel surface, a pen injector. "You experienced psychogenic trauma," one of them said. "Hallucinations caused by exposure. Your memories are not reliable." Spectre laughed, dry, bitter. He looked down at his hands, still blistered, knuckles raw, fingernails gone. His voice dropped. "I know what I saw." They slid the injector forward. "This will help. You'll forget the noise, the pain, the false images." He didn't take it. Instead, he reached into the folds of his uniform. Ripped and blackened, but hidden inside was something they hadn't found. A backup chip, encased in a melted GoPro housing, scratched, fried, but intact. They froze. "What is that?" Spectre said nothing, just stared at them. Then, "I recorded everything." He had routed his own feed through an offline wrist rig, something he'd rigged during recon missions in Kandahar. A last resort recorder, unlinked from comms, undetectable. And on it, the creatures, the hive, Lugo's return, the thing that wore his face, the scream across all frequencies. He had it, and they hadn't known. They moved quickly after that. 2 more officers entered. One held a syringe, the other a cold pack. Spectre was restrained, medicated. The last thing he heard before losing consciousness. "Room 19 is closed." But memory is strange. They erased his official logs. They wiped the body cams, they reprogrammed his mission brief, and they handed him a new reality. A falsified operation in northern Canada, lost squad due to a snowpack collapse, survivor rescued after wandering 2 days in a dissociative state, clean, contained, filed under non-combat loss. End of story. That's what they told him. That's what they told the press. That's what they told themselves. But it wasn't the end. Because Spectre never let the chip out of his sight. He got out, honorably discharged, new name, new city, but the footage, he kept it. And now, it's here, on MindFuel, leaked, decrypted, backed up 100 ways. Everything he saw, everything they tried to make him forget. It's real, it's raw, and it's coming in Chapter 9. If you think this ends in a debrief room, you haven't been listening. They didn't bury the truth. They fed it. And next, we show you the footage they said was corrupted. The moment they realized it wasn't just watching, it was remembering. If you're hearing this, then they didn't catch it in time. I don't care if they erase me. Don't care if they burn every record, every log, every face on that wall. Because you need to know, this wasn't some Black Ops accident. This wasn't a weather event or psych trauma or stress-induced delusion. We were sent there. We were let in. And they knew. They knew something was already living under that ice. They're in our wilderness. Not like wolves. Not like men. They don't bleed like us. And they don't die. Burn this to every drive you can. Mirror it. Share it. Because they're coming closer now. And they already know how to speak with our voices. Operation Grey Echo, officially denied. Species unknown. Survivors 1. It's warm in here. Let me know if you'd like a recap trailer script, alternate ending, or to begin the next horror series.